Inside an abandoned warehouse, the night was harsh and silent, broken only by the wind cutting through the iron cracks. Two police officers, sent for a routine check, were walking through the dark space until they were surrounded by masked men. In seconds, they were knocked down and held on the ground, while heavy kicks hit their bodies, leaving them breathless. From the top of a staircase, the boss emerged and shouted, his dry voice filling the metallic void. "Finish them off now," he ordered, without hesitation. The attackers paused for a brief instant, listening to the command with fixed eyes. On the ground, the officers struggled to move, but the force of the blows was unstoppable. It was in that second that from the shadows a police dog charged forward, stopping the scene just in time. But what happens next? No one will ever forget. Love stories with animals. Then subscribe now and don't miss any. Thanks for joining us. Now we return to our story. The abandoned warehouse sat like a forgotten monument on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan, its broken windows catching the last rays of afternoon sunlight. Detective Jake Harrison adjusted his radio one final time as he and his partner, Detective Sarah Mitchell, approached the rusted entrance. The tip had come in anonymously that morning, suspicious activities at the old Riverside Industrial Complex that had been shuttered for over a decade. "Seems quiet enough," Sarah muttered, her keen eyes scanning the perimeter. At 32, she had earned her reputation as one of the sharpest investigators in the Detroit Police Department, her intuition rarely leading her astray. Something about this place, however, made her uneasy. Jake nodded. Though his expression remained tense, at 38, he had seen enough to know that quiet didn't necessarily mean safe. The weathered brick building loomed before them, its steel doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. "Remember what Captain Rodriguez said, we're just doing a preliminary check. No heroics." The wind whistled through the skeletal framework of broken loading docks, creating an eerie symphony that seemed to echo from every corner of the vast complex. As they stepped through the main entrance, their footsteps reverberated against concrete floors stained with years of neglect. Pigeons scattered from the rafters above, their wings beating frantically against the industrial silence. "Look at this place," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying further than intended in the cavernous space. Scattered debris covered the floor. Old newspapers, broken glass, and remnants of machinery that once powered this hub of activity. "Hard to believe this used to employ half the neighborhood." Jake was about to respond when a sound made both detectives freeze. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and coming from multiple directions. In seconds, they found themselves surrounded by figures emerging from behind massive concrete pillars and industrial equipment. Each person wore dark clothing and masks that concealed their identities, moving with a coordination that spoke of careful planning. Well, came a voice from above. Both detectives looked up to see a man standing on a metal catwalk, his presence commanding immediate attention. Though his face was partially hidden in shadow, his voice carried an authority that made it clear he was in charge. Detectives Harrison and Mitchell, right on schedule. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her radio, but one of the masked figures stepped closer, shaking his head slowly. The message was clear without words being spoken. Jake felt his heart rate increase as he counted at least 8 people surrounding them, all positioned strategically to cut off any escape routes. "Who are you?" Jake called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're here on official police business. You need to step aside and identify yourselves." A low chuckle echoed from the catwalk. "Official business? In my warehouse? I think you'll find that your official business ends right here, detectives." The man began descending the metal stairs, each step ringing out like a bell in the vast space. "You see, we've been expecting you." Sarah exchanged a glance with Jake, her mind racing. How could they have been expected? The tip had come in just that morning, and they had followed standard protocol, unless... How did you know we were coming? That's the beauty of it all. Detective Mitchell, you're asking the wrong questions. The leader reached the ground floor, and now they could see him more clearly. He was tall, well-built, with graying hair and eyes that held an unsettling intensity. The question isn't how I knew you were coming. The question is why you're really here. One of the masked figures stepped forward, pulling out what appeared to be a tablet device. The screen showed surveillance footage. Jake and Sarah at the police station that morning, receiving their assignment from Captain Rodriguez. The timestamp clearly showed it was recorded in real time. Impossible, Jake breathed. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Someone had been watching them, tracking their movements, recording their conversations. Who are you people? We're the ones who've been watching Detective Harrison. Watching and waiting, the leader gestured to his companions, who began to close the circle around the two officers. You see, we represent certain interests that have grown quite concerned about the thoroughness of your recent investigations. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Over the past 3 months, she and Jake had been working on a complex case involving irregularities in city contracts and suspicious connections between local businesses and government officials. They had been close to a breakthrough when the case was suddenly reassigned to another department. This is about the Morrison construction case, isn't it? She said, pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Someone didn't want us getting too close to the truth. The leader smiled, though there was no warmth in his expression. Detective Mitchell, your reputation for perception is well deserved. Yes, this is very much about your investigation and about sending a message to anyone else who might be thinking of following in your footsteps. Jake stepped protectively closer to his partner, his mind working furiously to find a way out of their situation. The exits were blocked. Their radio calls would likely be jammed. And these people clearly had resources and planning on their side. What kind of message? The kind that shows even the police department's finest can be neutralized when they become inconvenient. The leader's voice took on a harder edge. You've been asking too many questions, looking into matters that don't concern you. That ends today. As if on cue, the masked figures began moving closer, their intentions becoming increasingly clear. Sarah reached for her service weapon, but found herself facing at least 3 people who were clearly prepared for such a response. The leader raised his hand, and everyone stopped moving. Now, Detective Mitchell, let's not make this any more difficult than it needs to be. We're not here to harm you physically. We're here to deliver a lesson in knowing when to stop digging. He pulled out a thick folder from inside his jacket. This contains detailed information about both of your personal lives, your families, your routines. Consider it insurance that you'll be more cooperative in the future. The weight of the threat settled over both detectives like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about them anymore. Jake thought of his teenage daughter Emma, who would be getting home from school soon. Sarah's mind went to her elderly parents, who lived alone across town. You can't intimidate us into abandoning our duty, Jake said, though his voice carried less conviction than his words. Can't I? The leader opened the folder and began reading. Emma Harrison, 16 years old, attends Lincoln High School, takes the number 47 bus home every day at 3:15. She's been struggling with her calculus class and stays after school for tutoring on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He looked up at Jake with a meaningful stare. Should I continue? The blood drained from Jake's face. The level of surveillance these people had conducted was terrifying in its thoroughness. Beside him, Sarah was struggling with her own growing fear as the leader continued reading personal details about her family that no stranger should know. What do you want from us? Sarah asked, her professional training warring with her maternal instincts. Simple. You forget about the Morrison construction case. You forget about the irregularities you discovered. You file your final report stating that the investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing, and you move on to other matters. The leader closed the folder with a decisive snap. In return, your families remain safe, your careers continue uninterrupted, and everyone goes home happy. Jake felt the walls of the warehouse closing in around him, both literally and figuratively. Years of police work had taught him to recognize when he was outmaneuvered, and this situation had all the hallmarks of careful planning and superior resources. But something deep inside him rebelled against simply giving in to these threats. "And if we refuse?" he asked, knowing he probably didn't want to hear the answer. The leader's smile returned, colder than before. "Then you'll discover that there are many ways to destroy a person's life without ever laying a finger on them. Careers can be ruined, reputations destroyed, families torn apart by scandal and suspicion. The choice is yours, detectives." The warehouse fell silent except for the distant sound of wind through broken windows. Both Jake and Sarah stood at a crossroads that would define not just their careers, but potentially their entire futures. The weight of the decision pressed down on them as the masked figures waited patiently for their response. It was then that a new sound broke the tension, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the shadows near the loading dock. Every head turned toward the source of the sound, and slowly a large German shepherd emerged from behind a stack of old crates. The German shepherd stood perfectly still for a moment, his intelligent brown eyes scanning the scene before him. His coat was a rich mixture of black and tan, and despite being alone, he carried himself with the confidence of a trained professional. Sarah recognized the bearing immediately. This was no ordinary stray dog. "Rex!" she whispered in disbelief. The dog's ears perked up at the sound of his name, and his tail gave the slightest wag of recognition. Rex was a retired police canine who had served with the Detroit Police Department for 8 years before being adopted by Officer Mike Patterson, Sarah's former partner who had relocated to Phoenix 6 months ago. The leader on the catwalk noticed the recognition in Sarah's voice, and his expression darkened. "Deal with the animal," he commanded one of his subordinates, his tone suggesting he viewed the dog as nothing more than an unwelcome interruption to his carefully orchestrated plan. But Rex was no ordinary interruption. As one of the masked figures approached him, the German shepherd lowered his head and released another warning growl, this one deeper and more menacing. His training kicked in instinctively, recognizing the threatening posture of the armed individuals surrounding his former colleagues. "Easy, Rex," Sarah called softly, trying to establish communication with the dog while her mind raced. How had Rex ended up here? Mike Patterson had taken him to Arizona, and there had been no mention of the dog returning to Detroit. Unless... The realization hit her like lightning. Mike Patterson hadn't just relocated to Phoenix, he had been investigating connections between Detroit city officials and construction companies across multiple states. If Rex was here, it meant Mike might be nearby, conducting his own surveillance operation. Jake caught the look in his partner's eyes and immediately understood. They weren't as alone as they had thought. The knowledge gave him a surge of hope, though he was careful not to let it show on his face. "What's a dog doing in an abandoned warehouse?" he asked, playing for time. "Irrelevant," the leader snapped. But there was something in his voice that suggested Rex's presence had caught him off guard as well. "Thompson, I said deal with it." The man called Thompson hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of confronting a police dog, even a retired one. Rex sensed the hesitation and took a step forward, his training telling him to protect the officers in distress. His presence had already begun to shift the dynamic in the warehouse, introducing an element of unpredictability that the leader clearly hadn't planned for. "Careful with that dog," another masked figure warned. "Those police dogs are trained to take down armed suspects, My cousin works with the K9 unit, and he says they never forget their training. The leader's jaw tightened with frustration. His carefully choreographed intimidation was being derailed by an animal, and he could sense his subordinates growing unease. It's just a dog," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We stay focused on the mission." Rex took another step forward, and Sarah could see the intelligence in his eyes as he assessed the situation. Retired or not, the German Shepherd recognized a threat scenario when he saw one. His posture was alert but controlled, waiting for the right moment to act. "You know what I think?" Sarah said, her voice growing stronger as she watched Rex position himself strategically. "I think you didn't plan for everything after all. I think there are a lot of things about this situation that you don't know." The leader's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What are you talking about, Detective Mitchell?" "I'm talking about the fact that Rex here isn't just any dog. He's a retired police K9 with commendations for service and bravery. And the fact that he's here, in this specific warehouse, at this specific time, means someone else knows about your little operation." Jake picked up on Sarah's strategy and added his own piece to the puzzle. Rex was partnered with Detective Mike Patterson before his transfer to Arizona. Patterson specialized in interstate fraud investigations, particularly involving construction contracts and municipal corruption. The color drained from several faces around the warehouse. Though the masks hid most of their expressions, the leader, however, couldn't hide the flicker of concern that crossed his features. Patterson was transferred months ago. He's no longer a factor in this equation. "Is he?" Sarah asked, her confidence growing. "Because Rex didn't just wander in here by accident. Someone brought him here, someone who knew we would be here today. Someone who's been conducting their own investigation parallel to ours." As if summoned by her words, a new voice echoed through the warehouse from somewhere in the rafters above. "She's absolutely right about that." Everyone's heads snapped upward, searching for the source of the voice. Rex's tail began wagging more enthusiastically, confirming what Sarah had suspected. Mike Patterson's voice continued from the hidden position above them. "Gentlemen, you've made several critical errors in your planning today. First, you assumed that the Morrison construction investigation was limited to Detroit. Second, you assumed that surveillance works in only one direction. And third, his voice moved, indicating he was changing position among the rafters. You assumed that retired police dogs lose their edge when they stop wearing badges. The leader pulled out a radio and barked orders to unseen personnel. "Perimeter teams, we have a complication. Unknown hostile in the building. Sweep and contain. I'm afraid your perimeter teams are currently occupied." Mike's voice came from a different location now, and there was a note of satisfaction in his tone. "Turns out, federal agents take a dim view of civilians, conducting unauthorized surveillance on police officers." The word "federal" sent a ripple of visible tension through the masked figures. Several of them exchanged glances, and Sarah could see doubt beginning to creep into their body language. This wasn't the simple intimidation operation they had signed up for. "You're bluffing!" the leader called out, though his voice had lost some of its earlier authority. "This is a local matter involving local officers and local business interests. Local business interests that have interstate connections, receive federal contracts, and have been laundering money through construction projects in 4 different states," Mike replied. "The FBI has been building a case for 18 months, and your little intimidation scheme today just provided the final pieces of evidence they needed." Jake felt a surge of vindication mixed with apprehension. The Morrison construction case had always felt bigger than what they could see from their limited perspective in Detroit. If Mike was telling the truth, they had stumbled into the edges of a massive federal investigation. The leader was clearly struggling to maintain control of the situation. His subordinates were growing restless, and several were looking toward the exits with obvious concern. Rex sensed the shifting mood and took another step forward, his training telling him that the tactical advantage was moving toward his side. "Even if that's true," the leader said, his voice strained, "you're still surrounded. You're still outnumbered, and the information we have about your families is still very real." Sarah stepped forward, her fear transforming into anger. "You made a mistake when you threatened our families. Police officers understand that the job comes with risks, but when you bring innocent people into it, you cross a line that can't be uncrossed." "She's right," Jake added, his own resolve strengthening. "Whatever this is about, whatever money or power is at stake, threatening children and elderly parents puts you in a different category entirely." Rex seemed to sense the changing energy and moved closer to the two detectives, positioning himself as a physical barrier between them and their captors. His presence was both protective and symbolic, a reminder that loyalty and duty couldn't be bought or intimidated away. The leader raised his hand to signal his team, but before he could give an order, new sounds echoed through the warehouse, the unmistakable noise of vehicles arriving outside, doors slamming, and organized footsteps moving with purpose. "Federal agents!" a voice called from outside the main entrance. "This building is surrounded! Everyone inside! Identify yourselves immediately!" The masked figures began looking around frantically, their careful coordination dissolving into panic. Several started moving toward what they thought might be escape routes, only to find their paths blocked by the strategic positioning of law enforcement outside. The leader's face contorted with rage and desperation. "This isn't over," he snarled at Jake and Sarah. "Even if you walk out of here today, the interests we represent don't forget. They don't forgive, and they have resources you can't imagine." Rex growled in response to the threatening tone, his hackles rising. The German Shepherd had heard enough posturing and intimidation. His loyalty was absolute, and these people had threatened his pack. As federal agents began entering the warehouse from multiple access points, the leader made one final desperate play, reaching inside his jacket for something that made Rex tense for action. Rex's instincts proved correct, as the leader's hand emerged from his jacket, holding not a weapon, but a small electronic device. With a quick motion, he pressed a button that immediately filled the warehouse with a piercing alarm sound, clearly designed to create chaos and confusion during the federal agent's entry. "Smoke screen protocol," he shouted to his remaining team members, and suddenly the warehouse began filling with thick, artificial fog from canisters that had been strategically placed throughout the building. The visibility dropped to mere feet, transforming the already tense situation into complete pandemonium. Federal Agent Diana Chen, leading the tactical team through the main entrance, immediately recognized the diversionary tactic. "Masks on! Watch for civilians!" she commanded her team through their communication system. At 41, Agent Chen had 17 years of experience with the FBI, specializing in organized crime and corruption cases that cross state lines. In the confusion, Rex's training became invaluable. Unlike the humans struggling with the sudden loss of visibility, the German Shepherd relied on his enhanced senses of smell and hearing to navigate the chaos. He moved confidently through the smoke, staying close to Jake and Sarah while tracking the movements of the various individuals around them. "Stay together," Jake called to Sarah, reaching out to maintain contact with his partner. The smoke was so thick that they could barely see each other, despite being only arm's length apart. "Rex, stay close, boy." The German Shepherd responded by pressing against Jake's leg, providing both guidance and reassurance. His calm presence in the midst of chaos was a testament to his years of training and experience in high-stress situations. Mike Patterson's voice cut through the confusion from his elevated position in the rafters. "Chen, Patterson here." The subjects are using pre-positioned smoke generators. Count is approximately 8 to 10 individuals, plus the 2 Detroit officers and the K-9. Primary target is the tall male who was directing the operation from the catwalk position. Agent Chen's voice came back crisp and professional. Copy that, Patterson. Teams Alpha and Beta, seal all exits. Team Charlie, advance slowly and use thermal imaging to identify individuals. All civilians are to be treated as potential hostages until proven otherwise. Sarah felt Rex brush against her side and followed his lead as he guided both detectives toward what seemed to be a safer position near the warehouse wall. The dog's ability to navigate through the chaos was remarkable, and she found herself trusting his instincts completely. "How did Rex know to come here?" she whispered to Jake as they moved through the smoke. "Mike must have brought him back from Arizona," Jake replied quietly. "But that means Mike's been working this case longer than we realized, and he knew we were walking into a trap." Through the artificial fog, they could hear the sounds of organized movement as the federal agents methodically cleared the building. There were occasional commands barked through communication devices, but no sounds of struggle or confrontation. The masked figures seemed to have melted away into the maze of industrial equipment and structural supports that filled the warehouse. Agent Chen's voice carried clearly through the smoke. "Detective Harrison, Detective Mitchell, please identify your position. We're here to assist, but we need to establish your safety first." "Here," Sarah called back. "We're against the east wall with Rex." Within moments, 2 figures in tactical gear emerged from the smoke. Their movements confident and purposeful. Agent Chen removed her mask as she approached, revealing an intelligent face with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Detectives, I'm Special Agent Diana Chen, FBI. Are either of you injured?" she asked, while her partner, Agent Rodriguez, took a defensive position to watch for threats. "We're fine," Jake replied, though his voice betrayed the stress of the past hour. But the leader of this group knows details about our personal lives, our families. They've been conducting extensive surveillance." Agent Chen nodded grimly. "That's consistent with what we've discovered about this organization. They call themselves the Municipal Protection Alliance, and they specialize in intimidating law enforcement officers who get too close to their clients' business interests." Rex sat at attention beside the agents, his ears constantly moving as he monitored the sounds around them. Even in the midst of the federal operation, his focus remained on protecting Jake and Sarah. "The good news," Agent Chen continued, "is that we've been tracking their activities for months. Your investigation into Morrison Construction was actually the break we needed to identify the local cell of their operation." Sarah felt a mix of relief and frustration. "So we were bait?" "Not intentionally." Mike Patterson's voice came from directly above them as he rappelled down from the rafters. At 45, Mike looked exactly as Sarah remembered him, lean, weathered, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much but still held hope for justice. Rex's tail began wagging furiously at the sight of his former partner. "Mike," Sarah exclaimed, genuinely happy to see her old partner despite the circumstances. When did you get back to Detroit?" 3 days ago, Mike replied, giving Rex an affectionate scratch behind the ears. "The FBI brought me in as a consultant when they realized the Arizona connections were just the tip of the iceberg. Rex and I have been conducting surveillance on this warehouse for 48 hours. Jake studied his colleague's face. "You knew we were coming into a trap and didn't warn us." Mike's expression grew serious. "We needed to see how they operated, how much they knew, and who their local contacts were. Your safety was always our primary concern, but we also needed them to reveal their hand fully." Agent Chen checked her communication device. "Teams Alpha and Beta report the perimeter is secure, but we only detained 4 individuals. The leadership appears to have escaped through a tunnel system we weren't aware of." The smoke was beginning to clear, revealing the full scope of the warehouse. Sarah could now see that the building was much larger than she had initially realized, with multiple levels connected by catwalks and service ladders. There were also several industrial vehicles parked in areas that hadn't been visible during their initial entry. "Tunnel system?" Jake asked. "How extensive?" "Unknown at this time," Agent Rodriguez replied, consulting a tablet device. Building plans from the city show standard utility access, but thermal imaging suggests there have been significant modifications to the substructure. Rex suddenly became alert, his nose twitching as he caught a scent that concerned him. He moved toward a section of the warehouse floor where a heavy metal plate seemed slightly out of alignment with the surrounding concrete. "Rex is indicating something," Mike observed, following his former partner's lead. "Boy's got the best nose in 3 states. If he's picking up a scent, we should pay attention." Agent Chen signaled to her team, and they approached the area Rex had identified. Using specialized equipment, they quickly confirmed that the metal plate was covering an access point to a tunnel system that extended beyond the warehouse property. "This explains how they got the surveillance equipment in place," Agent Chen said, examining the hidden entrance. "And how they planned to escape if their operation was compromised." Sarah knelt down beside Rex and stroked his head appreciatively. "Good boy, Rex. You found something important, didn't you?" The German Shepherd looked up at her with obvious pride, his tail wagging. Despite being retired from active duty, Rex clearly missed the satisfaction of police work and the sense of purpose it provided. Mike checked his watch and frowned. "Chen, we need to move fast. If they're using the tunnel system to escape, they could surface anywhere within a 6-block radius, and if they have vehicles waiting..." "Already on it," Agent Chen replied, speaking into her communication device. "Control, this is Chen. We need full perimeter expansion to a 6-block radius, all potential exit points monitored. Suspects are using underground tunnels for egress." Jake looked around the warehouse with new understanding. This wasn't just about intimidating us. This whole place is a staging area for a much larger operation." "Exactly," Agent Rodriguez confirmed. "The Municipal Protection Alliance doesn't just threaten individual officers. They gather intelligence, coordinate intimidation campaigns, and serve as a buffer between organized crime and law enforcement. What happened to you today was just one small part of a much bigger picture." Sarah felt a chill as the implications became clear. How many other officers have they targeted? How many investigations have been compromised? Agent Chen's expression was grim. "That's what we're trying to determine. But based on what we've learned so far, the scope is much larger than anyone suspected." Rex suddenly tensed again. His ears pricked forward as he detected sounds that the humans couldn't hear. His body language shifted from relaxed alertness to active concern, and he moved protectively closer to Jake and Sarah. "What is it, boy?" Mike asked, immediately trusting his former partner's instincts. The answer came in the form of distant rumbling sounds that seemed to emanate from beneath the warehouse floor. The tunnel system was apparently still active, and someone was moving through it with heavy equipment or vehicles. Agent Chen raised her hand for silence and spoke quietly into her communication device. "All units, we have possible underground movement. Maintain positions and prepare for additional contacts." The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant rumbling, which seemed to be growing closer. Rex's hackles rose slightly, and his protective stance became more pronounced. Whatever was happening below ground, the German Shepherd's instincts told him it represented a significant threat to his pack. The rumbling beneath the warehouse floor grew more distinct, and Agent Chen made a quick, tactical decision. "Patterson, take Rex and the detectives to the north corner. Rodriguez, get thermal imaging on that tunnel entrance. I want to know what's coming up before it gets here." Mike gestured for Jake and Sarah to follow him, with Rex leading the way toward what appeared to be the most defensible position in the warehouse. As they moved, Sarah noticed something that had escaped her attention during the initial chaos: sophisticated electronic equipment mounted discreetly throughout the building. "Mike, look at all this surveillance gear," she whispered, pointing to cameras and listening devices that were now visible in the clearing smoke. They weren't just planning to intimidate us. They were recording everything. Jake studied the equipment with growing alarm. If they recorded our conversation about the Morrison construction case, they have information about our investigation methods, our sources, everything we've discovered so far. Agent Rodriguez's voice cut through their discussion. "Chen, thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures moving through the tunnel system. Count appears to be 6 to 8 individuals. And they're carrying significant equipment." Rex positioned himself between the tunnel entrance and the group, his training telling him to create a barrier against potential threats. His calm confidence provided reassurance to everyone around him, even the federal agents who were seeing him work for the first time. "What kind of equipment?" Agent Chen asked, maintaining her position near the tunnel access point. "Hard to determine specifics through the concrete, but the signatures suggest electronic devices, possibly communication equipment or data storage systems," Rodriguez replied, adjusting his thermal imaging scope. "They're moving slowly but deliberately." Mike knelt beside Rex and spoke quietly to the German shepherd. "Easy, boy. We're going to handle this professionally, just like old times." Rex's ears twitched in acknowledgement, and his posture remained alert but controlled. The underground rumbling suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to echo through the tunnel system. Agent Chen raised her hand, signaling for complete quiet. Everyone in the warehouse held their breath, waiting to see what would emerge from below. Instead of the tunnel entrance opening, a new voice began speaking through hidden speakers throughout the warehouse. The sound quality was crystal clear, indicating a sophisticated communication system. "Agent Chen, Detective Harrison, Detective Mitchell," the voice began. It was the same leader who had confronted them earlier, but now he sounded calm and composed rather than desperate. "I trust you're all comfortable up there." Agent Chen spoke toward the nearest speaker. "This is Special Agent Chen, FBI. You need to surrender immediately and cooperate with federal authorities." A low chuckle echoed through the speakers. "Agent Chen, I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation. We're not the ones who need to surrender. You see, while you've been playing tactical games in the warehouse, we've been accessing something far more valuable than your immediate capture." Sarah felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. What's he talking about? "The tunnel system you discovered connects to more than just escape routes," the voice continued. "It connects to the Detroit Police Department's evidence storage facility, the Municipal Records Office, and the county courthouse basement. We've been conducting our own investigation, gentlemen and ladies, into you." Jake's face went pale. "That's impossible. Those buildings have security systems, access controls." "Had security systems," the voice corrected with obvious satisfaction. "Amazing what can be accomplished when you have unlimited resources and months of preparation. While you've been investigating Morrison Construction, we've been investigating the investigators." Agent Rodriguez spoke urgently into his communication device. "Control, we need immediate security checks on all municipal buildings within a 6-block radius. Possible unauthorized access to evidence and record storage." Rex sensed the increased tension in the humans around him and moved closer to Sarah, pressing against her leg in a gesture of comfort and protection. His presence reminded her that regardless of what psychological games their opponents were playing, they still had allies and resources. Mike's expression hardened as he processed the implications. "Chen, if they've accessed the evidence storage facility, they could compromise ongoing investigations across the entire department, not just ours, but dozens of active cases." "That's exactly right, Detective Patterson," the voice from the speakers confirmed. "We now have access to every piece of evidence, Every witness statement, every investigative report filed by the Detroit Police Department over the past 18 months, including several cases that certain federal agencies thought were completely secure. Agent Chen's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "What we've always wanted, Agent Chen. To demonstrate that law enforcement agencies are not as untouchable as they believe. That dedicated individuals with sufficient resources can turn the tables on any investigation." The voice paused dramatically. "But more specifically, we want Detective Harrison and Detective Mitchell to understand the true scope of what they stumbled into." The speakers crackled with static for a moment before a new sound began playing recorded conversations that Jake and Sarah recognized as their own voices discussing the Morrison construction case with Captain Rodriguez. But the recordings had been edited and manipulated to make it sound as though they were accepting bribes and agreeing to suppress evidence. "That's fabricated," Sarah exclaimed. "Those conversations never happened like that." "Can you prove it, Detective Mitchell?" the voice asked mockingly. "Because we have timestamps, voice analysis, and corroborating surveillance footage. The question isn't whether these recordings are authentic. The question is whether anyone will believe your denials once these recordings become public." Jake felt the ground shifting beneath him metaphorically. "Would you're trying to frame us for the very corruption we were investigating?" "Frame is such an ugly word, Detective Harrison. We prefer to think of it as providing alternative interpretations of existing events. Your investigation into Morrison Construction showed admirable dedication, perhaps too much dedication for officers who were supposedly conducting an objective inquiry." Agent Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of federal law enforcement. "Fabricating evidence against police officers is a federal crime. Blackmail and extortion carry severe penalties. You're making your situation worse with every word." "Are we, Agent Chen?" the voice replied. "Because while we've been talking, our associates have been uploading the edited recordings to multiple media outlets, social media platforms, and law enforcement oversight organizations. By tomorrow morning, the story of two Detroit detectives taking bribes to cover up municipal corruption will be front-page news." Rex growled softly, responding to the stress and anger he sensed from the humans around him. Mike placed a calming hand on the German Shepherd's head while his mind raced through possible countermeasures. "Even if that's true," Mike said, speaking toward the speakers, "forensic analysis will prove the recordings were manipulated. Voice patterns, background noise, digital signatures, all of that can be examined by experts." "Absolutely correct, Detective Patterson. In fact, we're counting on it." The voice took on a tone of satisfaction. "Because the forensic analysis will take weeks or months to complete. During that time, Detectives Harrison and Mitchell will be suspended from duty pending investigation. Their reputations will be destroyed, their families subjected to media scrutiny, and the Morrison construction case will be quietly transferred to investigators who are more understanding of certain business realities." Sarah felt sick as she realized the sophistication of the trap they had walked into. "You planned all of this from the beginning. The anonymous tip, the warehouse, even knowing about Rex and Mike's involvement. Planning is what separates professionals from amateurs, Detective Mitchell. We knew about Detective Patterson's return to Detroit 3 days before he actually arrived. We knew about the federal investigation into our activities before Agent Chen filed her first report. And we knew about your personal vulnerabilities before you ever heard the name Morrison Construction." The tunnel entrance suddenly hissed as hidden hydraulics activated, and the metal plate began to rise slowly. Rex immediately moved into a protective stance, placing himself between the opening and the group of law enforcement officers. "But here's what we didn't plan for," Agent Chen said, her voice growing stronger. "We didn't plan for Rex's ability to track sense through your tunnel system. We didn't plan for our own surveillance operation that's been running parallel to yours. And we definitely didn't plan for the federal task force that's been investigating municipal corruption across 7 states. The tunnel entrance stopped opening halfway, and there was a long silence from the speakers before the voice returned, now noticeably less confident. "What task force?" Agent Chen smiled grimly. "The one that's been building cases against the Municipal Protection Alliance for 18 months. The one that includes not just FBI agents, but representatives from the Department of Justice, the Treasury Department, and the Internal Revenue Service. You see, while you've been focused on local corruption and intimidation, we've been tracking the money trail across state lines." Rex's ears perked up as he detected new sounds from the tunnel system movement that seemed different from before, more hurried and less organized. His body language suggested that whatever was happening below ground, it wasn't going according to the original plan. "The beautiful thing about financial crimes," Agent Chen continued, "is that they leave digital footprints that are almost impossible to erase completely. Every payment, every money transfer, every shell company transaction creates records that trained forensic accountants can follow anywhere." The speakers crackled with static before the voice returned, now edged with frustration. "You're bluffing. If you had that kind of evidence, you would have moved against us months ago." "Would we?" Mike asked, stepping closer to the speakers. "Or would we wait until you committed enough federal crimes in front of enough witnesses to ensure that every member of your organization faces significant prison time?" Rex suddenly tensed and looked toward a different section of the warehouse, his senses detecting something that the humans had missed. His training told him that the tactical situation was about to change dramatically. Rex's instincts proved accurate when a section of the warehouse wall that everyone had assumed was solid began to move. A hidden door, perfectly camouflaged to match the surrounding brickwork, slid open with the quiet efficiency of professional engineering. What emerged from the opening, however, was not what anyone expected. Captain Rodriguez stepped through the doorway, his familiar uniform and badge clearly visible in the warehouse lighting. Behind him came 2 other figures that Jake and Sarah recognized immediately. Detective Lieutenant Karen Walsh from Internal Affairs and Assistant District Attorney Michael Brennan. "Captain!" Sarah's voice was filled with confusion and growing dread. "What are you doing here?" Captain Rodriguez looked around the warehouse with an expression of carefully controlled authority. At 55, he had commanded respect throughout the Detroit Police Department for over 2 decades. His presence should have been reassuring, but something in his demeanor sent chills through both detectives. "I'm here to clean up a situation that has gotten completely out of hand," Captain Rodriguez replied, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Detectives Harrison and Mitchell, Agent Chen, I need you to understand that what you've stumbled into is far more complex than any of you realized." Agent Chen stepped forward, her federal authority clear in her posture. "Captain Rodriguez, this warehouse is currently a federal crime scene. You need to explain your presence here immediately." Lieutenant Walsh moved to stand beside Captain Rodriguez, her expression unreadable. "Agent Chen, I'm afraid the situation is not as straightforward as you believe. What we have here is a convergence of several ongoing investigations that were never meant to intersect." Rex began to pace restlessly, his training telling him that something was fundamentally wrong with this new development. The German Shepherd's agitation was subtle but noticeable to Mike, who had worked with him for years. "Rex is picking up on something," Mike said quietly to Agent Chen. "He's trained to recognize deception and hostile intent. If he's agitated, there's a reason." Assistant District Attorney Brennan cleared his throat and pulled out a leather portfolio. "Detective Patterson, your dog's instincts are correct to be suspicious. What I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change your understanding of the Morrison construction case and everything that has happened today." Jake felt his world beginning to tilt on its axis. What are you talking about? Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression a mixture of regret and resolve. Jake C. Serra, the Morrison construction investigation was never about municipal corruption. It was about something much more important and much more dangerous. Morrison Construction is a front company for a federal witness protection program that has been operating in Detroit for 3 years. The words hit both detectives like physical blows. Sarah's mouth fell open in shock. That's impossible. We found evidence of bid rigging, payoffs, irregular contracts, all carefully orchestrated to create a believable cover story, Lieutenant Walsh explained. Morrison Construction was designed to look corrupt because that was the best way to hide the fact that it was actually a federal safe-house operation for witnesses testifying against organized crime families. Agent Chen's expression showed that this revelation was news to her as well. I was never briefed on any witness protection operation involving construction companies. Because you weren't supposed to know, Captain Rodriguez replied. The operation was compartmentalized for security reasons. Only a handful of people in each agency were aware of the true nature of Morrison Construction. Mike studied the captain's face intently. And the Municipal Protection Alliance? The intimidation campaign against Jake and Sarah? Assistant District Attorney Brennan opened his portfolio and pulled out several documents. The Municipal Protection Alliance is real, and they are everything Agent Chen described: criminal organization that intimidates law enforcement. But their interest in silencing your investigation had nothing to do with protecting corrupt business practices. Rex suddenly stopped pacing and sat down directly between Jake and Sarah, his body language indicating maximum protective alert. His training told him that the greatest threats often came from unexpected sources, and every instinct he possessed was screaming warnings. They wanted to silence your investigation, Captain Rodriguez continued, because they discovered that Morrison Construction was a federal operation. They realized that by exposing the corruption angle, they could force the government to shut down the witness protection program and eliminate protected witnesses who were preparing to testify against their real clients. Jake felt as though the ground had completely disappeared beneath his feet. So everything we investigated, everything we discovered, was part of an elaborate shell game designed to protect people whose testimony could bring down 3 major organized crime families, Lieutenant Walsh confirmed. The problem was that your investigation was too thorough. You were getting close to uncovering the truth about what Morrison Construction really was. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. The anonymous tip that led us here today came from the Municipal Protection Alliance, Captain Rodriguez admitted. They needed to get you to a location where they could either silence you permanently or discredit you completely. This warehouse was supposed to be your final resting place, Detective Mitchell. They never intended for you to leave alive. The revelation sent a shockwave through everyone present. Rex immediately moved closer to Sarah, pressing against her legs in a gesture of comfort and protection. His loyalty was absolute, regardless of the complexities of human deception and betrayal. Agent Chen's training kicked in as she processed the implications. Captain, if what you're saying is true, then every law enforcement officer involved in this situation has been manipulated. We've all been playing our parts in someone else's script. Exactly, Assistant District Attorney Brennan confirmed. The Municipal Protection Alliance has been using legitimate law enforcement investigations as cover for their own operations. They've been tracking federal witnesses, identifying protection protocols, and systematically eliminating threats to their clients. Mike's face darkened with anger. So when I brought Rex back from Arizona to help investigate this case, we were actually helping criminals track down protected witnesses. Not intentionally, Captain Rodriguez replied. But yes, your investigation provided them with information they needed to identify weak points in the protection program. The tunnel entrance suddenly activated again. drawing everyone's attention. This time, figures began emerging from below federal marshals, escorting individuals in civilian clothing who were clearly under protective custody. The witnesses Morrison Construction had been created to protect. Rex's demeanor changed immediately when he saw the new arrivals. His training recognized federal marshals, and his protective instincts extended to anyone under official protection. He moved to a position where he could monitor both the newcomers and the existing group. These are some of the witnesses whose safety your investigation inadvertently compromised, Lieutenant Walsh explained as the group emerged from the tunnel system. When the Municipal Protection Alliance learned about your case, they realized they could use your legitimate police work to expose a federal operation. One of the federal marshals approached Agent Chen. "Ma'am, we need to relocate immediately. Our intelligence indicates that the Municipal Protection Alliance has teams moving toward this location. The witnesses' cover has been completely blown." Sarah looked around the warehouse with new understanding. This entire situation was engineered to force a confrontation that would expose the witness protection program. They used our investigation as bait to draw everyone into the open. "And it worked perfectly," a familiar voice said from the warehouse entrance. The leader of the Municipal Protection Alliance stepped through the main door, no longer wearing a mask. His face was calm and confident, and he was accompanied by several individuals in professional business attire rather than the masked figures from earlier. Captain Rodriguez's hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon, but the leader raised his hand in a gesture of peaceful intent. "Please, Captain Rodriguez, there's no need for dramatics. We're all professionals here." The leader smiled with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. "You see, everything that has happened today has been carefully orchestrated to achieve a very specific outcome." Rex growled low in his throat, his senses telling him that this man represented a fundamental threat to everyone he was protecting. The German Shepherd's training recognized predators, regardless of how they disguise themselves. "What outcome?" Agent Chen demanded. The leader's smile widened. "The complete discrediting of the Federal Witness Protection Program operating in Detroit. By tomorrow morning, the story will break that federal agents and local police have been operating an illegal surveillance program targeting legitimate businesses. The witnesses will be forced to relocate again, but this time without the credibility of their testimony intact." Jake realized the full scope of what they were facing. "You've been planning this for months. Everything that happened to us, everything we discovered, all of it was just setting up this moment. Years." "Actually, Dante," the leader corrected, "the Municipal Protection Alliance doesn't just react to threats, Detective Harrison. We anticipate them, we shape them, and we turn them to our advantage. Your investigation gave us the perfect cover story to destroy a federal program that was threatening our clients' interests." Sarah felt sick as she understood the implications. The witnesses will lose their protection, their testimony will be discredited, and the crime families you represent will escape justice. "Justice is a matter of perspective, Detective Mitchell," the leader replied. "From our perspective, justice is ensuring that legitimate business interests are protected from government overreach and prosecutorial misconduct." Rex stepped forward, placing himself directly between the leader and the group of law enforcement officers. His message was clear. This person was not welcome near his pack. The German Shepherd's loyalty and courage provided a stark contrast to the web of deception and manipulation surrounding them. The leader looked down at Rex with amusement. "Even the dog understands the situation better than most of you. He knows that everything has changed, and there's no going back to the way things were." It was then that Mike Patterson stepped forward with the expression that mixed anger with determination. "Actually, there is one thing you didn't account for in your perfect plan." Mike Patterson's confident words caused everyone in the warehouse to turn toward him, including the leader of the Municipal Protection Alliance. Rex sensed the shift in energy and moved closer to his former partner, his tail beginning to wag slightly for the first time since the confrontation began. "What I didn't account for?" the leader asked, his composure showing the first cracks of uncertainty. Mike reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recording device. "You didn't account for the fact that Rex and I have been conducting our own surveillance operation for the past 72 hours. Not just of this warehouse, but of every meeting, every phone call, and every planning session your organization held to set up today's operation." The leader's face went pale. "That's impossible. We swept for surveillance equipment daily." "You swept for electronic surveillance," Mike replied with satisfaction. "But you never thought to look for a retired police dog with enhanced training in covert operations. Rex's nose can track individuals through urban environments for miles. And his hearing can detect conversations through walls that would require sophisticated equipment to monitor." Rex's tail wagged more enthusiastically as he sensed his former partner's growing confidence. The German Shepherd had indeed been working, using abilities that no electronic device could replicate. Agent Chen stepped forward with new understanding. "Patterson, are you saying you have recordings of them planning this entire operation?" "Not just recordings," Mike confirmed. Rex tracked their scent trails to 3 different meeting locations over the past week. "We have photographic evidence, audio recordings, and documentation of their entire conspiracy to manipulate federal law enforcement operations." Sarah felt hope returning for the first time since entering the warehouse. "But Mike, how did you know to start surveillance before today?" Mike knelt down beside Rex and scratched the dog's ears affectionately. "Because Rex told me something was wrong 3 days ago. When we arrived in Detroit, he immediately started displaying protective behaviors around your apartment building, Sarah. His training told him you were being watched, even before I confirmed it through other sources." The German Shepherd looked up at Mike with obvious pride, his intelligence shining through his expressive brown eyes. Years of partnership had created a communication between them that transcended words. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression showing a mixture of relief and admiration. "Patterson, are you telling us that your dog identified a threat to our officers before any of our intelligence networks detected it?" "Rex has abilities that no technology can match," Mike replied. "His loyalty is absolute. His instincts are perfect, and his dedication to protecting his pack never wavers. When he sensed that Jake and Sarah were in danger, nothing was going to stop him from helping." The leader of the Municipal Protection Alliance looked around the warehouse with growing desperation. "Even if you have recordings, it doesn't matter. Our plan is already in motion. The media releases are scheduled. The witness protection program is compromised, and law enforcement credibility is about to be destroyed." Rex suddenly stood at full attention. His ears pricked forward as he detected sounds that preceded the arrival of additional federal agents. Within moments, the warehouse was surrounded by law enforcement vehicles, their red and blue lights creating a kaleidoscope of color through the broken windows. Agent Chen spoke into her communication device. "This is Chen. We have the situation contained and are ready for prisoner transport. Actually," Assistant District Attorney Brennan said, pulling out additional documents from his portfolio, "we're ready for something much more significant than prisoner transport." The leader's confidence finally cracked completely. "What are you talking about?" Lieutenant Walsh stepped forward with handcuffs. "Indeed, we're talking about the fact that the entire witness protection operation was a carefully orchestrated sting operation designed to identify and capture members of the Municipal Protection Alliance. Morrison Construction was never protecting real witnesses. It was bait to draw your organization into the open." Jake's jaw dropped in amazement. "You mean the whole thing was a setup from the beginning?" Captain Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. "Nice The federal task force needed a way to identify all the members of the Municipal Protection Alliance, trace their financial networks, and document their methods of operation. Creating a fake witness protection program that appeared vulnerable was the perfect way to make them reveal themselves. Sarah felt as though her understanding of reality had been turned upside down multiple times. So our investigation into Morrison Construction was completely genuine, Agent Chen confirmed. You discovered real irregularities because we created real irregularities to make the bait convincing. Your thorough police work made the operation more credible than we had hoped. Rex wagged his tail enthusiastically as he sensed the resolution of the crisis. His protective instincts told him that the threat to his pack had been neutralized, and his training recognized the successful completion of a complex operation. Mike looked down at his former partner with deep affection. Rex, you probably understand this situation better than any of us. You knew something was wrong, you tracked the threats, and you protected your people, just like you've been doing your entire career. The German Shepherd responded by sitting proudly beside Jake and Sarah. His message clear: his loyalty extended to his entire law enforcement family, regardless of the complexities of their human operations. As federal agents began processing the captured members of the Municipal Protection Alliance, Agent Chen approached the two Detroit detectives. Harrison, Mitchell, I want you to know that your investigation was exemplary. Your thoroughness and dedication to following evidence wherever it led made this entire operation possible. Jake looked around the warehouse with new appreciation. So when we were threatened about our families, when they tried to intimidate us, they were revealing their methods and capabilities to federal surveillance that was recording everything. Lieutenant Walsh confirmed. Every threat they made, every piece of personal information they disclosed, every intimidation tactic they used was documented as evidence. Sarah knelt down beside Rex and looked into his intelligent eyes. You knew, didn't you? You understood that we needed protection, and you made sure we had it. Rex's tail wagged gently as he accepted her gratitude. His training had taught him to protect and serve, but his heart had taught him the meaning of loyalty that transcended duty. Mike stood beside his former partner and addressed the group. Just what Rex demonstrated today is something that no amount of technology or tactical planning can replace. He showed us that loyalty, courage, and unwavering dedication to protecting others are the most powerful weapons against any threat. As the warehouse began to empty of law enforcement personnel and prisoners, the 4 humans and 1 German Shepherd stood together in a moment of quiet reflection. The crisis was over. Justice had prevailed, and the bonds of trust and loyalty had proven stronger than any conspiracy. Captain Rodriguez placed his hand on Jake's shoulder. Detectives, I want you to know that your performance today exemplified everything we value in police work. Your commitment to the truth, your protection of each other, and your willingness to face overwhelming odds for the sake of justice. Rex moved to the center of the group, allowing everyone to pet him and acknowledge his contribution to their success. His presence reminded them all that the best qualities of law enforcement loyalty, courage, and selfless service could never be corrupted or defeated by those who sought to undermine justice. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Sarah looked back at the building that had been the scene of so much deception and revelation. You know what I learned today? Sometimes the most important investigations aren't about solving crimes. They're about discovering what we're truly capable of when we refuse to give up on each other. Mike smiled as he attached Rex's leash. And sometimes the most important evidence isn't what we find in case files. It's what we find in the courage and loyalty of those who stand beside us when everything seems impossible. Rex barked once, a sound of satisfaction and completion. His work was done. His pack was safe and justice had prevailed. For a retired police dog, there could be no greater reward than knowing his service continued to make a difference. As they walked out of the warehouse into the Detroit evening, the bonds between them had been strengthened by shared adversity and mutual trust. The investigation was over, but the lessons about loyalty, courage, and the power of never giving up would last a lifetime. Rex trotted beside them with his head held high, every inch the professional law enforcement officer he had always been. His loyalty had proven that some things in this world are incorruptible, unbreakable, and eternal. Dear viewers, we hope the story of Jake, Sarah, Mike, and the incredible Rex has touched your hearts and reminded you of the power of loyalty and courage in our daily lives. Rex's unwavering dedication to protecting his pack shows us that true loyalty knows no boundaries and never wavers, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to join our community by subscribing to our channel and giving this video a thumbs up. In the comments below, tell us about a time when loyalty and courage made a difference in your life, or share your thoughts about Rex's incredible demonstration of dedication. We bring you new stories every day that explore the complexity of human relationships, the power of courage, and the bonds that unite us in our quest for justice and truth. Don't miss our upcoming content, and remember that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on four legs and have hearts bigger than we can imagine. We're waiting for you in the comments.